My name is Brianna and I am 28 years old. The email arrived on a cold Tuesday morning, blunt and sterile like a bill from a hospital. It was from my father, David. The subject line was just firm access. The body was shorter. We have changed all the locks at the firm and the financial access codes. We no longer trust you. I read it twice. No, dear Brianna, no love, Dad, just a corporate execution. I took a slow breath, feeling the Chicago air chill my lungs. I replied with just 9 words. Noted, that was clever, but I believe you forgot one thing. Have you ever been the one holding everything together only to be treated like you were the one tearing it apart? Drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. I would love to know who is part of our community. It did not start with a lockout. That was just the audit coming to a close. It started 4 years ago with a phone call from my father, David, that I should have ignored. His voice was thin and full of a panic I had never heard before. He told me the family's architectural legacy was dying. My brother, Brandon, the golden child with a marketing degree and a penchant for vanity projects, had run the firm into the ground. Foreclosure notices were piling up like autumn leaves. David begged me to help, but there was a catch. It had to be a secret. We could not let the community know we were struggling, and we certainly could not let Brandon feel like a failure. I was a successful architect at a rival firm, making a salary they always called boring, compared to Brandon's a creative vision, but suddenly, my boring money was their only hope. I became their anonymous angel. For 48 months. I wired $13,000 every single month to an account my father set up, $13,000 every month. I downgraded my car. I stayed in a drafty studio apartment instead of buying the home I had saved for. I lived on coffee and ambition while my $624,000 investment kept their lights on and their reputations polished. Looking back, people ask why I would sign up to be their victim. They do not understand the trap of cruel normalization. When you grow up in a family that only values you when you are useful, your worth becomes tied to the fires you can put out. It is a prison without bars. You spend your life taking the final exams they set for you, hoping that this time, you will finally belong. I thought if I saved them, they would finally see me as a partner, not an obligation. I was not just sending money. I was trying to buy a seat at a table that was already being sold behind my back. My compassion had been a luxury they had overdrafted for years. I had been the silent investor in their version of family, but I had forgotten the most important rule of being an angel. Angels are not meant to be on the payroll, and they are certainly not meant to find out they are being laughed at by the very people they are trying to save. I rubbed my eyes, trying to summon regret as I looked at my bank balance, but there was only clarity. This was not a breakdown, it was a balance sheet that was finally ready to be settled. The strain of the monthly transfer was starting to feel like a physical weight on my chest. It was a Tuesday night, the kind of night where the Chicago wind rattles the window panes of my studio apartment. I was staring at my banking portal, watching $13,000 leave my account. That single click meant I would be eating leftovers for the rest of the month. It meant another 30 days of lying to my friends about why I could not go out. It was the price of a seat at a table that my family had already removed. Then my phone buzzed. It was an email from my mother, Jennifer. The subject line read, FUD Investor Luncheon Plans. I was confused. No one had mentioned a luncheon to me. I was the one funding the firm, was I not? I opened the message. It was a forwarded chain. Jennifer must have hit forward instead of reply, a classic mistake, a lethal one. I scrolled past her short note to find the original message from my brother, Brandon, to my father, David. Brandon wrote, Dad, the angel is getting a little noisy with her suggestions again. She's asking about the fourth quarter projections. Let's just use this dumb luck money to finally turn things around. She does not need to be in the weeds for the luncheon. It's too risky. Dumb luck money. My blood went cold. My $624,000 sacrifice was just a dumb luck to him, but it was my mother's reply that stopped my heart. She had written back to David, David, just handle her, tell her we appreciate her input, but whatever you do, do not invite her. This luncheon is for real investors, not her. Just make sure the checks keep clearing. She's a guest with a wallet, not a partner. A guest with a wallet. I read it again. The screen blurred for a second, but I did not let a single tear fall. It was not an insult. It was a job description. My role in the family had been finalized and approved. I was not a sister. I was not a daughter. I was a subscription service they had stopped using but forgot to cancel. I was a line of credit with no interest and no expiration date. For 4 years, I had downgraded my life so they could keep theirs polished. I had skipped vacations and driven a car that shook at every stoplight, all while telling myself I was saving a legacy. Now I realized the legacy was just a costume they had rented with my money. I stood up from my desk and walked to the kitchen. I poured a glass of water and watched my hand. It was perfectly steady. Anger was not loud this time, it was clinical. The illusion did not just crack, it vaporized. They were not just incompetent, they were deceitful. They never saw my money as a loan, they saw it as an entitlement, and they had never, not once, actually seen me. I drank the water and felt the cold clarity settle into my bones. The guest with a wallet had just been given her closing invoice. It was time to stop being an angel and start being an auditor. I did not call my father to argue, I did not text my mother to beg for an explanation. My compassion had been a luxury they had overdrafted for years, and tonight, I was closing the account. I sat in the blue light of my laptop, feeling a different kind of sunrise, the kind made of facts, numbers, and quiet retribution. I opened a new, password-protected file and named it the Steward's Ledger. This was not a breakdown, it was a cold, precise audit. I compiled everything, line item, every single wire transfer, the $13,000 monthly operating loan. I watched the total at the bottom of the spreadsheet climb past $300,000, past $500,000, finally settling at $624,000, line item, every condescending email from Brandon calling my work cute, line item, every placating text from David telling me to trust the brand, while he siphoned my savings to cover up their failures. But a ledger is just ammunition. I needed a weapon. My family seemed to forget a fundamental rule of business. The firm, the legacy, and the building were all owned by a holding company set up decades ago. David and Brandon were just board members with management roles. The real power resided with my grandfather, John, the founder, who was now living quietly in Florida. He still held the only voting share. Unlike the rest of them, John valued integrity over appearances. He was the one who had taught me that a building is only as strong as its foundation. I waited until I had every PDF and every receipt organized, then, I picked up the phone. He answered on the second ring, his voice as clear and steady as the blueprints he used to draw. I did not waste time on small talk. I told him I needed something from him, something that would finally bring honesty back to the firm. I explained that the annual investor luncheon was coming up on Thursday, and I needed him to grant me his proxy vote. I needed his majority share. There was a long silence on the line. I could picture him looking out over the water, processing the request. He knew me. He knew I would not ask for this unless the structure was already collapsing. It is time, is it not? He said, his voice quiet but certain. Yes, sir, I replied, it is. He did not ask why, and he did not ask what I was planning. He just trusted me, the one thing the rest of my family had never been willing to do. I will have my attorney send the documents, he said. It is done. When I hung up, the steward's ledger was glowing on my screen. The trap was set. They were not shocked by what they had done. They were about to be shocked that I had stopped playing along. They thought they had locked me out, but they had actually just locked themselves in with an auditor who had every receipt. I did not stop at the bank transfers. When you are performing a forensic audit, you do not just look at what is missing, you look at what was sold. I spent the next 3 nights digging through the firm's archived servers, into what Brandon called his ghost files. These were the folders he thought were hidden, the ones where he kept the messy truth of his strategy. My eyes were burning from the glare of the screen, but my mind was sharper than ever. This was not a search for family, it was a search for evidence. I found a subdirectory buried under a generic marketing label. Inside were a series of encrypted correspondence chains with our firm's biggest competitor. The subject line was Aurora Project Proprietary Designs. My heart skipped a beat, but not with fear. It was the thrill of the hunter finding the kill. The Aurora Project was my masterpiece. I had spent 2 years designing that skyscraper. Every curve of the glass and every structural support was a piece of my professional soul. I opened a PDF attachment. It was an invoice, not for architecture services, but for intellectual property. Brandon had not just been incompetent, he had been a predator. He had sold my proprietary designs, the work that was supposed to be my entry back into the family firm, to our chief rival for $120,000. $120,000, my blood ran cold, but the anger was clinical. I dug further into his personal account logs. The money had not gone to the firm's vendors, it had not gone to the taxes or the overdue mortgage. It had been funneled through a shell account to settle a debt with an offshore casino. My brother had not just run the legacy into the ground, he had pawned my future to cover his gambling losses. This was the lethal discovery I needed. Before this, he was just an ungrateful brother and a bad manager. Now, he was a criminal. Selling proprietary designs without the board's approval or the lead architect's consent is intellectual property theft and fraud. I looked at the timestamps on the emails. He had sold the designs the same week my mother had called me an angel investor, to my face while calling me a mark behind my back. They were using my money to keep the lights on so Brandon could have the time to sell my work and use the profits to gamble. The realization did not make me want to scream, it made me want to execute. This was no longer a family drama, it was a hostile takeover of a corrupt regime. I saved every email, every invoice, and every bank record. I did not feel sadness, and I did not feel pity. I rubbed my eyes trying to summon regret, but there was only clarity. This was not a breakdown, it was a balance sheet. The guest with a wallet had just found a way to take back the entire bank. The Chicago investor lunch was held at a private club overlooking the lake. The room was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and the polite clink of crystal glasses. My father, David, stood at the head of the main table, his face a mask of practiced confidence. My mother, Jennifer, was laughing with a prominent donor, playing her role as the matriarch of an architectural dynasty. And Brandon, he was the star. He stood at the podium, preparing to present our firm's future strategy, a strategy built on designs he'd already sold to our competition. I stood in the back of the room for a moment, watching the performance. They looked so powerful, so untouchable, but I knew the truth. Their position was an illusion, a house of cards built with my $624,000. When you grow up in this world, you realize there is a profound difference between having and being. My family had the name, the suits, and the reputation, but they had no integrity, no character, and no strength. Their power was just a shell, a costume they had rented with my boring, practical salary. This module of their lives was finally coming to an end. Brandon clicked through slides of meaningless marketing buzzwords, fueled by the polite applause of the crowd. At the end, he raised a glass of vintage champagne. I want to make a special toast, he said, smirking out at the room, to our anonymous angel investor, wherever you are. Your naive belief in our vision made this possible. We could not have done it without you. The room chuckled politely. My father beamed. My mother dabbed her eye with a silk handkerchief. I did not wait for the laughter to die. I walked calmly, my heels clicking like a metronome on the stone floor, right up to the podium. Brandon looked confused. Like a golden retriever trying to solve a calculus problem. I did not say a word to him. I simply unplugged his laptop and plugged in my own. My name is Brianna, I said to the room, my voice cold and clear, and I am the investor who has personally funded this firm for the last 4 years. The projector screen flickered, and then there it was, 10 feet high for every shareholder to see, the steward's ledger. You toast my naive belief. I continued, I call it an investment of $624,000. You could have heard a pin drop. I clicked to the next slide, displaying the ghost files I had audited. I projected the invoice from our chief rival, showing the $120,000 payment Brandon received for selling the Aurora project designs. I projected the bank logs proving he had siphoned $60,000 directly from the firm to pay off offshore gambling debts. Finally, I projected my mother's email calling me a guest with a wallet, not a partner. Jennifer made a small, strangled sound. David looked like he was going to be sick. This was the moment the empty wallet was finally revealed. Their authority did not just crack, it vanished. Without my money to hide their failures and my designs to sell as their own, they were nothing but ghosts in expensive suits. They were not shocked by what they had done. They were shocked that I had stopped playing along. I stood there, calm and factual, watching their carefully constructed world dissolve into ash. Before David could find his voice or Brandon could form a coherent excuse, a new presence dominated the room. The projector screen flickered once more, and Grandfather John appeared via video link from Florida. He did not look at his son or his grandson. He looked at the room of shareholders with a steady, disappointing gaze. His voice, though quiet, echoed with absolute authority through the club's sound system. As the sole owner of the holding company, he announced that he was personally initiating an immediate forensic audit of the firm's finances. He used the proxy vote I had secured to remove David and Brandon from their positions on the board, effective immediately. The collapse was total and immediate. Brandon literally staggered, his golden child confidence evaporating as he grabbed the edge of the mahogany podium for support. Jennifer was openly sobbing into her hands, the performance of the architectural matriarch finally over. David just stood there mute, his entire legacy and brand dissolving into ash in a single sentence. It is strange watching a family like that break. I realized then that there is a profound difference between having and being. My family had everything, the name, the prestige, the reputation, but it was all a shell, a costume they had rented with my boring, professional money. They had nothing of their own, no integrity, no character, and no strength. The moment the money was questioned and the illusion of power was punctured, There was nothing left inside. They were not a family collapsing, they were just an empty wallet finally revealed. Brandon was escorted from the building by club security. A detective was already waiting for him downstairs to discuss the $120,000 intellectual property theft and the $60,000 in siphon wire fraud. My mother tried to reach for my arm as I walked toward the exit, her eyes red and pleading, but I did not even flinch. I rubbed my eyes trying to summon regret. But there is only clarity, they are ghosts now, haunting a building they no longer own. I run the firm now. Grandfather John handed me the keys the next day, not as a gift, but as a job. We are rebuilding it this time with integrity. It turns out the true family legacy was not the blueprints or the prestige or even the $624,000 I had invested. It was the honesty I had to fight to bring back to it. This is a letter for those of you listening who have ever been made to feel like you are on the edge of your own life. Stop waiting for them to send you an invitation. Your worth is not determined by their inability to see it. You do not need their permission to be the main character in your own story. So go ahead, change the locks, draw the boundary, be your own angel investor and start building a life that is truly, finally yours. I walked out onto the balcony of my new office, looking at the Chicago skyline I would now help shape. My phone vibrated in my suit pocket, a final text from David, begging me to reconsider. I did not even read it. I hit delete, then blocked every single one of their numbers for good. Inside, my laptop glowed with a different kind of sunrise, the kind made of facts, numbers, and quiet retribution. If this story inspired you to stop asking for permission to be the main character in your own life, please share and subscribe for more justice. Integrity is the only legacy that lasts.